We're back in the garage today for another simple DIY build, and that is some homemade bed stiffeners. Now, looking at these online, they don't seem to be anything more than some basically angle iron steel cut into a nice 90-degree L that helps straighten out the bed sides on these Tacomas. And if you don't know, particularly the newer ones, but the first gens as well, they become susceptible to the bedside starting to bow out if you have a lot of weight on, and I definitely have some weight up there with the camper. So wanted to tackle building these myself as I have the materials, and I figure let's just do it ourselves, save ourselves some money. Should be able to achieve very similar results. And I also wanted to build these before I mount the fridge slide. That way I can make sure that the slide doesn't interfere with them. And that way I can build these so they don't interfere with the slide. So let's go ahead and get right into it. So the bed stiffener is going to come basically right up to this curve here in an L shape and come down, somewhere about out here. Pretty simple. We'll have to drill holes through here and holes through here in this flat portion to be able to through bolt the stiffener, and then those bolts will just be accessed behind the taillight here. So pretty straightforward. I'll just lift the tailgate up here. You can see that there's definitely, a gap at the top. It's a little bit bigger than what's down here at the bottom, and this should help straighten that out. For this project, I've got some 1/8 inch steel angle iron here that we will be using, that I had laying around from the camper build. Didn't actually use it, but that should be plenty strong enough for this. Took some measurements, and it's really looking like about 18 inches total length is going to be about perfect for this. Should be plenty long enough. It stretches all the way up to where the bedside starts to curve over here at the top, and comes out to somewhere right around here. So that should be plenty for this. Don't want it sticking out too much. So we have our piece cut to size, and I'm just using a angle grinder here for this. But now we're going to measure 10 inches in and make a mark, and then what we're going to end up doing is cutting two 45-degree cuts in here so we can make a 90-degree bend in this piece. Alright, so we got it cut out, and the 45-degree cut, there's a little bit more room there than I would like, but we should be able to fill that in with weld pretty easily. You can see that we just scored it in there a touch and then just bent it pretty much, and it's a nice perfect 90-degree corner. Okay, update. So it's been about 30 minutes now, and I got both of them cut out and bent. You can see did a better job on this one with the 45-degree cut there. Little gap there, little gap. Shouldn't be much of a problem, but what we're going to end up doing then is welding this on both sides and in the corner to give it some extra strength, and then we might run a small diagonal piece of maybe 1-inch tubing across here just to really stiffen that up, and then drill some holes in this baby, and then drill some matching holes in the back of the truck, and then paint them, and these will be almost done. So we're gonna get moving on to the next steps. When these are finished and bolted in, that's pretty much what they'll look like. They'll sit right in there like so. You can see they don't stick up all that far, which is great. Got it all polished up and ready to weld, so that's what we're going to do next, is tack it and then weld that across. Cut a nice 45 in here, which keeps it, a little more lower profile and out of the way on that. But yeah, we're going to go ahead and get welding. So it's welded. It is definitely not pretty, but that's okay. I got to clean up the inside here. Had some difficulties. I'm definitely not a pro welder, but it's plenty strong enough, and honestly I'm never going to see that or care, and a coat of paint's going to be going on it, so for me, good enough. So for holes, we're going to be drilling at 9, 6, and 3 inches from the bottom up the vertical side, and then the bottom just has 2, which are at 1 inch and 6 inches. So these are now ready for paint, and again, these holes were drilled at 3, 6 and 9 inches from the bottom. So if this is standing up vertically like that, the bottom here, and that's a 5/16 inch hole for 5/16 hardware. And then for the bottom, we did, I'm actually measured from the edge here, and we did 2 and 7 inches. And then basically, yeah, just drilled those like that, giving us room for some hardware. Did that to both sides. So now we're ready to throw some paint on these. Just threw a coat of bed liner paint on them, and they're just hanging up to dry now. So looks pretty good. So now that we're back, you can see that these got painted with that bed coating stuff, and they look pretty decent. So they should do the job. One thing to note is that this weld right here, so even though I had this lined up in a perfect 90, as I was welding this seam, it did shrink in a little bit. So it's not perfectly straight up and down, so something to be mindful of. You'll probably have to be greater than 90 and then count on the heat of the weld bringing it in. It's not a really big deal because I'm just going to put maybe like a washer behind this topmost bolt just to keep it from pulling the bed in too far. But yeah, I mean, took me 2 hours and then time to let the paint dry on this. And now we have ourselves some homemade bed stiffeners for about, I don't know, $5 in material maybe. So very hard to justify spending $120 on a set of these when you can make them yourself, and they will do the job just as well as something off the shelf would. So yeah, at the end of the day, not trying to win any beauty contests with these bad boys. They just have to function and keep the beds upright. So the next thing that we'll do is we'll go ahead and drill these matching holes into the bottom and sides of the truck bed and get these babies bolted up. Back in the garage working on these brackets. The next portion is I got this flat stock here of steel, and this is 1/8 inch thick here by, let's see, 1 inch. So I'm going to cut this to pieces that will match the bottom and the side in terms of length, and drill in matching holes as well. What this will do is it'll act as basically a backing plate for these brackets to reinforce, kind of where we're pulling, give it some extra strength. So it's not just these bolts basically, hanging on to the material of the truck bed and the truck bed sides. So some extra strength and reinforcement there. And the bolts will go through both of these and basically sandwich the truck bed in between them for extra strength and rigidity. So yeah, we're going to go ahead and get to measuring this, and then we'll cut it up with the angle grinder and then drill some matching holes and paint it. We just finished the first little piece here, so I cut this to 7 inches, and then we just drilled holes to match the holes we already had in the bracket we made there. So that's pretty much that piece. I'm going to get started on the other side. I already have it cut, just need to drill it, and then we'll make the vertical pieces as well. We just finished the back side of the vertical ones. I just put the bolts through to make sure they fit. Cut it to 8 inches long, and then just matched the holes up basically and drilled them. I'm going to take it off and round the corners and sand it down, and then they'll be ready to paint. So these are painted now and looking pretty good. And what we're going to do now is we're going to start lining up basically where we want these stiffeners to go and start drilling some holes. So that's the plan. So we have the bottom holes drilled what we're going to do is then line up the bracket and drop some bolts through so we can keep it lined up, and then we're going to go ahead and drill the 3 holes up the side, and those will come through just right here on this panel here, so we'll have room to access the back side of those and bolt it on. As you can see, there's nothing on the back side of this hole here. I did take some touch-up paint and dress up the hole that I drilled, that way we don't get any rust. And you can see the other hole right over here. So 2 holes, just gonna take off that little burr down there, but then we should be good. So I did a test fit. We got all of the bolts in here, and the backing plate on this side, as well as underneath here. And yeah, it's working pretty good. I'm gonna close this here, and so got a caliper in there, and the gap up here at the top is identical to down here at the bottom. You know, maybe like a fraction of a millimeter different, but pretty happy with that. We're gonna go ahead though and take it back out, make sure all of the holes that are here have touch-up paint in them, and then we're gonna go ahead and silicone these holes. That way no dust or water comes in through these points, and we'll move on to the next side. So I took the bracket off because I gotta go run to the hardware store real quick, and I need to get some extra hardware for that side. But yeah, 5.13 millimeters is what it was. Now that it's off, let's see. Now that it's off, it is 6 point, that's not even the highest spot, will come up here, almost 7 millimeters. So basically pulled it in about 2 more millimeters with the stiffener, which is awesome. That'll help things out. But yeah, we're gonna put this other taillight in, go to the hardware store, come back, and install these bad boys and be done with it. Both sides are now installed. Much improved. Everything's looking good. Pretty happy with how it turned out. So the DIY bed stiffeners are done. That's really all there is to it. They were pretty simple and straightforward to make, and also super cheap. I already had that angle iron laying around, and that's why I wanted to build them myself. All I had to do was buy the flat stock for the backing plates and then some grade 8 hardware. So all in for me is probably less than $20. If you had to buy all of the materials, you're probably looking at somewhere close to $30, which is still a substantial savings over buying them aftermarket. And these should be plenty strong enough. That's 1/8 inch steel anyways, which looks to be thicker than a lot of the options out there. So time will tell on these. It's better than nothing at this point. I really wanted to get them in there for the trip to the dunes that I took, and I also needed to get them done so I could put in that fridge slide, and we kind of accomplished all of that. I could have done a much better job on the welds if I would have taken my time, but again, I was kind of on a tight timeline, and they are out of the way, and you don't really see them anyways, and for me it was definitely about function over form there. But I hope you guys found this video informative. If you're looking at doing something like this, definitely encourage you to kind of tackle these projects. This one was a relatively easy project. Leave a thumbs up. Let me know what you guys think in the comments, and subscribe, because there'll definitely be more DIY videos to come. So I'll catch you guys in the next video.